The morning sun cast long shadows across the crowded Veterans Affairs hospital waiting room. Sarah Mitchell sat quietly in the corner, her prosthetic leg hidden beneath loose-fitting jeans. The 28-year-old former Marine kept her eyes down, focused on the appointment slip trembling slightly in her hands. 3 months had passed since the IED explosion in Afghanistan that changed everything. Yet the phantom pain in her missing limb reminded her daily of that terrible moment. Around her, the waiting room buzzed with typical morning activity. Families chatted softly while elderly veterans shared war stories. Children played quietly near their grandparents, and medical staff moved efficiently between patients. Sarah tried to blend into the background, something she had become expert at since returning home. The automatic doors whooshed open, and a group of 5 men entered. They wore casual civilian clothes, but something about their bearing immediately marked them as military. Their eyes scanned the room with practiced awareness, noting exits and potential threats in seconds. These were Navy SEALs, though most people in the waiting room had no way of knowing that. Commander Jake Morrison led the group. At 35, he carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from years of successful missions in the world's most dangerous places. His team was there for their own medical appointments, routine checkups required after their recent deployment. They had served together for 4 years, becoming more like brothers than colleagues. As Sarah stood to check on her appointment time, her prosthetic leg caught slightly on the chair. She stumbled forward, catching herself against a nearby magazine rack. The sudden movement caused several magazines to cascade to the floor with loud slaps that echoed through the quiet waiting area. Every head in the room turned toward the commotion. Sarah's face flushed deep red as she knelt down, trying to gather the scattered publications. Her movements were awkward as she struggled to balance without putting full weight on her prosthetic leg. Instead of helping, several people in the waiting room began to whisper and point. A middle-aged woman in expensive clothes shook her head disapprovingly. "Some people just don't watch where they're going," she muttered loud enough for others to hear. Her teenage daughter giggled, pulling out her phone as if to record the embarrassing moment. An elderly man near the reception desk clicked his tongue in annoyance. "Clumsy," he said to his companion. "Probably one of those homeless veterans. Causing trouble again." The whispers grew louder. A young mother pulled her child closer, as if Sarah posed some kind of threat. Even the receptionist looked irritated, glancing pointedly at the clock, as if Sarah was deliberately disrupting the morning schedule. Sarah's hands shook as she gathered the last magazine. The phantom pain in her missing leg suddenly felt worse, as if her body was responding to the emotional distress. She had faced enemy fire without flinching, had pulled wounded comrades to safety under impossible circumstances. Yet this simple moment of public embarrassment threatened to break her composure completely. Commander Morrison watched the scene unfold with growing anger. His trained eye immediately recognized what others missed. The way Sarah favored her left leg, the slight mechanical sound when she moved, the careful way she positioned herself suggested a recent amputation. The small Marine Corps pin on her jacket confirmed what he already suspected. His teammates noticed too. Petty Officer Rodriguez clenched his fists as he watched people mock someone who had clearly sacrificed for her country. Chief Williams stepped forward slightly, his protective instincts kicking in. These men had seen too many wounded warriors struggle with civilian life to ignore what was happening. Sarah finally managed to stack the magazines back on the rack. As she straightened up, she caught sight of the judgmental faces around her. The weight of their stares felt heavier than any pack she had carried during her deployment. She began moving toward the exit, abandoning her appointment rather than endure more humiliation. The expensive woman continued her commentary. "I don't know why they let people like that in here," she said to her daughter. "This is supposed to be a respectable place." That comment was the final straw for Commander Morrison. He exchanged glances with his team, seeing the same anger reflected in their eyes. They had a code about taking care of their own, and that code extended to all service members who had paid the ultimate price for their country. As Sarah reached for the exit door, Morrison made his decision. What happened next would depend on how far these people wanted to push their cruelty. The Navy SEALs had dealt with enemies in foreign lands, but sometimes the worst enemies were the ungrateful citizens they had sworn to protect. The commander stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Ma'am," he called out to Sarah, his tone respectful but commanding enough to stop her retreat. "Could you wait just a moment?" Sarah turned back, confusion evident on her face. She had expected more criticism, not what sounded like genuine respect in the stranger's voice. The waiting room fell silent, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Morrison's team moved to flank him, their casual demeanor shifting to something more purposeful. The civilians who had been so quick to judge suddenly found themselves the focus of 5 very serious men who looked like they could handle any situation that might arise. The expensive woman's smug expression began to falter as she realized the dynamic in the room had completely changed. Commander Morrison approached Sarah with the careful respect reserved for fellow warriors. His teammates formed a loose semicircle, not threatening but clearly protective. The entire waiting room watched in tense silence as the dynamic shifted completely. "Marine," Morrison said, his voice carrying unmistakable recognition and honor. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. Most civilians couldn't identify her service branch. Yet this stranger had spotted the subtle clues immediately. Sarah straightened instinctively, muscle memory from years of military training taking over, despite her emotional state. "Yes, sir," she responded, though she wasn't sure of his rank or even his branch of service. Morrison extended his hand. "Commander Jake Morrison, Navy SEALs. I wanted to thank you for your service and sacrifice." His words rang clearly through the silent waiting room, ensuring everyone understood exactly who Sarah was and what she represented. The expensive woman's face went pale. Her teenage daughter slowly lowered her phone, suddenly understanding the gravity of what they had been mocking. The elderly man who had called Sarah clumsy shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact. Chief Williams stepped forward next. "Ma'am, I'm Chief Petty Officer Williams. That's a beautiful prosthetic you're managing there. My brother-in-law has one from his tour in Iraq. Takes real strength to adapt to that." Sarah blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the sudden show of understanding and support. For months, she had felt invisible and forgotten. Now these strangers were treating her with the dignity she had almost forgotten she deserved. Petty Officer Rodriguez joined the conversation. "How long since your injury, Marine?" His question was direct but kind, the way one veteran speaks to another. 3 months, Sarah managed, her voice stronger now. "Kandahar Province. IED took out our convoy." The SEALs nodded solemnly. They had lost friends to similar attacks and knew the weight those words carried. Morrison's expression hardened as he glanced around the waiting room at the people who had shown such callous disregard for a wounded warrior. 3 months and you're already walking that well?" Specialist Thompson observed with genuine admiration. "That's outstanding progress. Shows real Marine toughness." The expensive woman attempted to salvage the situation. "Well, we didn't know," she said weakly. She should have said something. Morrison turned toward her, his gaze sharp enough to cut steel. "Should have said something?" His voice remained controlled, but everyone in the room could hear the danger beneath the calm surface. "You mean she should have announced her service and sacrifice before you decided to mock her?" Chief Williams picked up the thread. "Ma'am, this Marine lost her leg defending your freedom. She was blown up by terrorists while protecting the very liberty that allows you to sit in this comfortable waiting room and judge others." The woman's daughter tugged at her mother's sleeve, clearly wanting to disappear. "Mom, we should apologize," she whispered urgently, but Morrison wasn't finished. He addressed the entire waiting room, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded men in life or death situations. This woman served multiple deployments in Afghanistan. She survived an IED blast that killed 2 of her fellow Marines. She spent weeks in military hospitals, enduring painful rehabilitation to learn to walk again. The elderly man who had made the homeless comment stood up awkwardly. "Look, I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "That's exactly the problem," Rodriguez interrupted. "You didn't realize, but you judged anyway. You saw someone struggling and decided to make it worse instead of better." Sarah stood straighter, feeling a strength she hadn't experienced since her injury. These men were fighting for her honor in a way that reminded her of the brotherhood she had lost when she left the military. Morrison continued his systematic dismantling of the bystanders' excuses. Every person in this room benefited from her service. While you were sleeping safely in your beds, she was standing post in hostile territory. While you complained about gas prices, she was dodging mortar rounds. The young mother who had pulled her child away earlier spoke up hesitantly. "We really are sorry. Is there anything we can do?" Thompson stepped forward. "Actually, there is. You can remember this moment. Remember that veterans come in all forms, and many carry invisible or visible wounds from their service. Remember to show respect instead of judgment." The receptionist, who had been watching the exchange with growing shame, approached with Sarah's appointment paperwork. "Miss Mitchell, I've moved you to the front of the schedule. Dr. Peterson will see you immediately." Morrison smiled at Sarah. "Marine, would you allow us to escort you to your appointment?" "It would be our honor." Sarah nodded, too moved to speak immediately. As the group began walking toward the medical offices, she found her voice. "Thank you. I was ready to give up on civilian life entirely." Williams matched her pace carefully. "Don't give up, Marine. You've got too much fight in you. We can see it." 1. Behind them, the waiting room remained subdued. The expensive woman sat in stunned silence, her worldview fundamentally shaken. Her daughter deleted the video she had started to record, ashamed of her impulse to mock someone's misfortune. The elderly man approached the reception desk. "Excuse me. Is there a way to pay for that young lady's appointment today? I'd like to cover her costs." Other people in the waiting room began stepping forward with similar offers. The young mother asked about veteran support groups she could volunteer with. Even the teenage daughter approached the receptionist to ask about visiting wounded veterans at the hospital. Morrison's team had accomplished their mission without firing a shot or raising their voices. They had transformed a room full of indifferent strangers into people who would think twice before judging others. As they reached the medical wing, Sarah turned to thank her unexpected protectors. What she saw in their faces was something she had missed desperately since leaving the military. The recognition that she belonged to something bigger than herself, a brotherhood that didn't end with discharge papers. Sarah's appointment went better than any she had experienced since returning from Afghanistan. Dr. Peterson, influenced by the morning's events, spent extra time discussing her progress and outlining new rehabilitation options. When she emerged from the medical wing an hour later, she found Commander Morrison and his team waiting in the hallway. "How did it go, Marine?" Morrison asked with genuine concern. "Better than expected," Sarah replied, holding up a referral form. "He's recommending me for a new experimental prosthetic program. Says I'm a perfect candidate." Chief Williams grinned. "Outstanding. You're going to do great things with that determination." As they walked back through the waiting room, Sarah noticed the dramatic change in atmosphere. The expensive woman stood up as they approached, her previous arrogance replaced by genuine remorse. "Excuse me," the woman said hesitantly. "I'm Margaret Sinclair. I wanted to apologize properly for my behavior earlier." "There's no excuse for what I said." Her daughter stepped forward as well. "I deleted the video I was taking. I'm really sorry. I didn't understand what you've been through." Sarah studied them both, seeing genuine regret rather than mere embarrassment. "Apology accepted," she said simply. "But maybe next time, try helping instead of judging." The elderly man approached with several other waiting room occupants. "Miss, we've all been talking, and we want to do something meaningful to show our support for veterans like yourself." Morrison watched with satisfaction as the man explained their impromptu plan to organize monthly volunteer sessions at the VA hospital. The young mother had already contacted 3 veteran support organizations. Even the receptionist had signed up to participate in a wounded warrior mentorship program. "This is what should happen," Rodriguez whispered to Thompson. "People just need to be reminded of what really matters." As they prepared to leave the hospital, Margaret Sinclair approached Morrison privately. "Commander, what you did today changed my perspective completely. Is there a way I can support your unit or other veterans?" Morrison handed her a business card for a Veteran Scholarship Foundation. This organization helps wounded veterans transition to civilian careers. They could use both volunteers and funding. Meanwhile, Sarah found herself surrounded by people asking genuine questions about military service and veteran experiences. For the first time since her injury, she felt valued for her sacrifice rather than pitied for her disability. The teenage daughter approached her shyly. "My school is doing a Veterans Appreciation Assembly next month. Would you consider speaking? I think other students need to hear your story." Sarah hesitated, still uncertain about public speaking with her disability. Thompson overheard and stepped closer. "Marine, you've got an important story to tell. Don't let uncertainty stop you from making a difference." Over the next hour, Sarah found herself committing to 3 speaking engagements, accepting 2 mentorship opportunities, and agreeing to participate in a prosthetic technology demonstration program. The same people who had mocked her weakness were now recognizing her strength. Morrison gathered his team as visiting hours wound down. They had accomplished far more than their routine medical appointments. They had reminded an entire room of people about the true cost of freedom and the dignity owed to those who served. "Marine Mitchell," Morrison said formally, "my team and I want to present you with something." He handed her a small wooden plaque bearing the Navy SEAL trident and an inscription, "To a warrior who never surrendered, with respect and gratitude." Sarah's composure finally broke. Tears streamed down her face as she read the inscription. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Williams replied. "Just remember that you're part of a brotherhood that doesn't end with discharge. We take care of our own." The expensive woman stepped forward one final time. "Miss Mitchell, I run a foundation that supports women in business. If you ever need career assistance or want to start your own organization, please contact me." She handed Sarah an elegantly printed business card. "I'd consider it an honor to help." As they finally left the hospital, Sarah walked differently. The same prosthetic leg that had caused her such embarrassment hours earlier now seemed less noticeable. Her posture was straighter, her confidence restored. Morrison's team had achieved a perfect mission outcome. They had neutralized hostility, protected a fellow warrior, and created lasting positive change in the process. Most importantly, they had reminded Sarah Mitchell that she was not alone in her struggle. 6 months later, Sarah would become a successful motivational speaker, helping other wounded veterans navigate civilian life. Margaret Sinclair's foundation would fund Sarah's nonprofit organization supporting amputee veterans. The teenage daughter would change her college major to psychology, inspired to become a veteran counselor. The elderly man would volunteer at the VA hospital every week for the next 3 years, learning the names and stories of dozens of veterans. The young mother would organize her neighborhood to adopt wounded warrior families during holidays. But on that morning, as they walked through the hospital parking lot, Sarah simply turned to her unexpected protectors and said, "Thank you for reminding me who I am." Morrison smiled and rendered a crisp salute. "Semper Fi, Marine. Once a warrior, always a warrior." As the 2 groups parted ways, Sarah realized that her struggle with civilian life had fundamentally changed. She was no longer a victim of circumstance but a victor over adversity. The SEALs had given her something more valuable than protection. They had restored her pride. The morning that began with humiliation had become the turning point that transformed not only Sarah's life but the lives of everyone who witnessed the power of standing up for what's right. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not on foreign battlefields but in hospital waiting rooms, where dignity and respect hang in the balance.